Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Scot Johnson.
Okay. So I'm having two thoughts right now. One, did I just mess up my hair? No, it's all right. Diana, thank you. Two, it's a little less scary when I'm wearing the helmet. So just bear with me a little bit. So I'll bet while I was walking out here, several of you looked at your agenda and said, why does he have a helmet on his head and what's he holding in his hand? Well, I can tell you that this is a square peg and this is a round hole. You see, when I was asked to speak for 15 minutes about team member engagement, my first thought was, that sounds like an excellent cure for insomnia. Okay? There's 2,500-ish of you, and you're having way too much fun. And my guess is some of you have still not slept from last night. And then there would be me, electrifying the crowd with PowerPoint slides, charts and graphs, and definitions, because I don't dance. So let me just illustrate what that might have looked like for you, okay? Let me get my professor voice on. As you can clearly see, Webster's Dictionary defines team member engagement as the emotional commitment a team member has to an organization, or how much a team member actually cares about their work. Now, if you look at slide 17B, you can clearly see the connection between manager behavior and team member performance, thereby proving, and my guess is that you start hearing Charlie Brown's teacher. Wah, 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 wah. And I get a lot of glassy eyes. So, okay. Let's agree for now, no definitions, no charts and graphs, no mathematical proofs. You get me in a space helmet, and if nothing else, you can tease me at the bar later tonight. All right? Fair enough? So instead, I thought I might tell you a story. It's a story about three astronauts whose very lives depended on something that you probably would say is completely impossible. Figuring out a way to put a square peg into a round hole. In fact, the whole story that leads up to this is pretty improbable. And it represents the collective effort of a bunch of people committed to doing the impossible fairly routinely. So I'm not used to speaking if I don't have audience participation. So on the count of three, we're going to start with Once Upon a Time. Ready? 1, 2, 3. One. Beautiful. The story starts in 1957. All right? You see, for the first time in the history of the world, you could look up into the sky and you could see a man-made object orbiting the Earth. It was called Sputnik, and it was brought to you, this huge engineering marvel was brought to you by our Cold War enemy, the Soviet Union. And worse yet for the United States, 4 years later, Yuri Gagarin, another Russian, became the first cosmonaut, to orbit the Earth. Now, I don't think I need to tell you that that did not sit well with the United States. These events challenged the very notion that we were the great superpower, the most advanced country in the world, that we were best at everything. It was a huge blow to our pride. So what did we do? How did we respond? Well, in fact, we did the impossible. So in 1961, and yeah, you should probably start taking notes at this point because there will be a test later. President John F. Kennedy made a very famous speech, and he laid out the biggest, hairiest, audacious goal any president has ever laid out. He said that by the end of the decade, just 9 years later, we would put a man on the moon and safely return him back to the United States. Now, at the time, nobody had any idea whether this was an achievable goal or not. We had very little of the technology we needed to do this. In fact, let me make a statement. The cell phone that you hold in your hand has many more times the computing power than NASA had available to them in the 1960s. In fact, they were still using slide rules. And my guess is that none of you know what that is. Some of you do, and you look like me. Just saying. But against odds, in 1969, as part of the Apollo 11 mission, Neil Armstrong took one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind, and became the first person to walk on the moon. In fact, to this day, no other nation has successfully put a man on the moon. So that explains the space helmet. Okay? You see, there's another part to the story. Because just 6 months later, on Apollo 13, something went horribly wrong. It was our third trip. And during a routine stir of the oxygen tank, there was an explosion. And that explosion crippled the lunar module. In fact, the landing on the moon became completely impossible. But what was possible, or what they hoped to be possible, was to bring the astronauts back to the Earth safely. By the way, that was another 4 days. So if you can imagine being in a damaged vehicle in the middle of space for 4 days, you're a better person than I am. So the first concern was oxygen, or more accurately, something they called breathable levels of carbon dioxide. So for those of you who skipped seventh grade science class, I did occasionally, humans breathe in oxygen, they breathe out carbon dioxide. Now, that works great on Earth because plants love carbon dioxide and it gives off oxygen. But when you're in a spaceship about to orbit the moon, finding a tree or two can be pretty difficult. And rolling down the window is probably not the way you want to go here. So they had to figure out how to filter out the carbon dioxide. Conveniently, NASA had filters for just such an occasion. Those filters looked like this. The hole they needed to go in looked like this. It was almost a bad joke, but it was completely true. 3 astronauts' lives, the reputation of the United States space program, the pride of the United States at the time, literally rested on figuring out a way to put a square peg into a round hole. Now, I cut a scene from a movie. Tom Hanks is much better at this than I am, so let's give him credit for that. It's from Apollo 13. And they're going to throw a bunch of numbers at you during the course of this, but let's just say that if the carbon levels got above 15 parts, they would die. And so they had to figure this out. So I want to show you that clip, and then I'll make a point to that, all right?
Gene, we have a situation brewing with the carbon dioxide.
We had a CO2 filter problem on the lunar module,
5 filters on the limb.
which were meant for 2 guys for a day and a half. So I told the doc,
You're already up to 8 on the gauges. Anything over 15 and you get impaired judgment, blackouts, the beginnings of brain asphyxia.
What about the scrubbers on the command module?
They take square cartridges.
The ones on the limb are round.
Tell me this isn't a government operation.
It just isn't a contingency we've remotely looked at.
Those CO2 levels are going to be getting toxic.
Well, I suggest you gentlemen invent a way to put a square peg in a round hole. Rapidly.
Okay, people, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we gotta come through. We gotta find a way to make this fit into the hole for this, using nothing but that. Let's get it organized.
Okay, let's build a filter.
Better get some coffee.
Filter's in place.
Roger, 13.
Suit circuit relief to close. CO2 canister, select to secondary.
All right.
Here goes.
I can hear it moving.
Just bring normal, fellas.
Aquarius, please advise on CO2 status.
Yeah, Houston, we're taking a look at those numbers right now.
still holding close to 15 units. Roger that, standing by.
Houston, the CO2 level has dropped to 9, and it is still falling.
Yes. Good job.
That is good to hear, Aquarius. And you, sir, are a steely-eyed missile man.
Okay. Yeah, it was amazing. What they did was truly amazing. And there's a kind of a lesson in here that was one of the greatest failures that NASA ever had. And it turned into one of their greatest successes. How they saved that crew. If you've not seen the movie, you should go see it. It's fantastic. All right, but by the way, if you haven't seen it, 3 days later, all 3 crew members returned safely to Earth. It's an amazing accomplishment. Now, okay, so it's a good story, right? Good story. What does that have to do with engagement? I talked earlier and I showed a fake definition of engagement. And there was a word in there that I want to bring back up now, and that word is caring. You see, in the very simplest terms, engagement is about how much you care about your job. It's about the things or experiences at work that affect how much you care or others care about their job. Like, having a friend at work, or being respected by your manager, or the way you interact with your manager. And at the store, let's be honest, engagement is about you, the store manager. The store manager has an overwhelming responsibility to engagement. I told you the story about what happened at NASA that led up to Apollo 13, but what you couldn't see in my story were all the engineers and all the people who cared about what they were doing. Why did they do it? Okay, like me, you're probably like, yeah, they got paid. Yeah, they did. But you have to remember, these were the brightest engineers in the world. They could get a job anywhere, at any time. And they chose long hours, impossible odds, and lower pay. Because they cared, and they wanted to be successful. They were highly engaged, highly creative, highly committed people that when they were confronted with challenges, they didn't cast blame. Instead, they did what they'd always done. They committed themselves to future success. Okay, a little brief story. Well before Neil Armstrong stepped on the moon, Vice President Lyndon Johnson was touring NASA when it was being built in Houston. And he was going up onto people and he was basically asking them, what do you do for NASA? And he went up and enthusiastically asked a person, what is it you do here for NASA? Not realizing he was addressing the janitor. The janitor looked at him and simply said, why, sir, I'm helping put a man on the moon. Now, I don't know if that's a true story. I've never been able to confirm it, but I want it to be true because in a very real way, that sums up what engagement means. You can hear the commitment and the caring in the way that he answered the question. His belief that what he did mattered to one of the greatest accomplishments of the 20th century. Look, I know here at Sport Clips, we aren't trying to put a man on the moon. I know we're not inventing the next great technology or trying to cure cancer, but I also know we do a lot more than cut hair. Every day we have the power to make a life a little bit better. A 20-minute MVP may be the best 20 minutes of someone's day. In fact, it might be the only good 20 minutes of that person's day. We intersect people at critical moments in their lives. Their first dates, their birthdays, their funerals, their weddings. And the experience that you create in the store is an experience that they will take with them into those events. And if you think these are just words, I'd like to read you something that comes from one of our stylists. A gentleman sat down in my chair and I could tell something was wrong. I didn't pry, but as I attempted to carry on a conversation about his plans for the week, he mentioned that his wife had just died of cancer and he was going to her funeral. He looked to be only 25 years old. He then apologized that he wasn't very talkative. We proceeded with the haircut, and then I took him back to the shampoo bowls to give him his MVP. I doubled it and did my best to make sure he was really relaxed. When checking out, I comped his haircut. You can tell he was very grateful. I'll always remember that haircut, and even though he didn't tell me, I could tell I truly made a difference in his day. It reminds me of something that I read from a poet named Maya Angelou, and she said, "People will forget what you said. They will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel." And I'm fairly sure that this client on that day will never forget that on one of the worst days of his life, someone took the time to make him feel something other than pain. When you can go back to your store and you can ask a stylist the question, "What do you do here at Sport Clips?" And they say something like, "I make people's lives a little bit better by providing them a terrific experience and a quality haircut," then you'll know you have some engaged team members. I honestly hope that as you go through the rest of the huddle, you'll find little ideas here and there that you can take back with you that help you engage and help your team engage. Because I'm telling you, that truly is a game changer for us. In the end, if you want to do something impossible, improbable, or maybe just a little unlikely, a great place to start is with an engaged team. So, what does a space helmet, a square peg, and a round hole have to do with team member engagement? Just about everything. I hope you have a wonderful day. Enjoy the conference. Thank you.